Okay, so I'm here. I'm Samir Merchant. I'm here with our observation of World Environment Day. I'm going to begin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, in the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. And also for those of you who may celebrate it or have friends and neighbors who celebrate it, Eid Mubarak. Yesterday was Eid al-Adha, which is one of the two major occasions celebrated by Muslims around the world. Um, Now I advance to the second page. There we go. And then I jump into to talk about World Environment Day, but of course I'll be coming at it from a Muslim perspective. So, what does Islam tell us about environmental awareness? It tells us we are stewards of God's creation. Uh, this is different from the view that some subset of Christians take that we are kind of created as dominions over the world. In Islam, no one has dominion over creation other than God himself. God himself. So we're just stewards. The other message that recurs throughout, like the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is that all creatures are to be treated with respect. The most direct one of these is the statement that whoever is merciful, even to a sparrow, God will be merciful to him on the day of judgment. But there are also many other examples. Um, for instance, the prophet also said that you cannot deny water to a thirsty animal. And there's also the example of the time when he woke up in the morning for the morning prayers and his cat was sleeping on his sleeve. So instead of waking the cat up, he actually tore off his sleeve. Yeah, just like I'm sure his cat was just as cute as Rachel's cat there, that Milo that she just pulled up into the screen. Hi, Milo. Yeah, we miss you. So while climate change is not the only environmental challenge we face today, that's the one I'm going to talk about because I feel like it's the most urgent one, but also it's the one I know the most about. Unlike past environmental challenges, one of the things with climate change is it's truly global one. No country is able to solve it on its own. And so this is one we all need to work together. Now, instead of seeing this purely as a problem, we can also see it as a chance to learn how to work with each other because climate change is the ultimate tragedy of the commons. You know, what we do to others, we also do to ourselves. And the other thing I will add is that, getting to know people from other backgrounds can foster respect. And that's part of what we're doing here. Um, but research has shown that actually the best way to engender that respect is to get people to work together to solve a common problem. And so, from that perspective, climate change can really be seen as an opportunity for all of us to learn how to work with each other towards a common problem. How should we respond to climate change? Well, I would say that the three takeaways, from my reading of the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, are the first is how hope. There is a line from Surah Yusuf in the Quran that says, "Surely none despairs of God's mercy except the unbelieving people." Another lesson is to avoid excess. There's a different ayat from the Quran that says, "And eat and drink and be not extravagant. Surely God does not love the extravagant." But perhaps most importantly, I would say, is the many, many sayings of the Prophet Muhammad attesting to the importance of taking action. So I have several slides after this that have all the different quotes about taking action. Uh, you'll see why it needs several slides. The first is an example from the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when a Bedouin man asked him, "O messenger of God, shall I tie my camel and rely on God, or leave her loose and rely on God?" The Prophet responded, saying tie her first and then rely on God. The message here is a little bit like the saying, God helps those who help themselves, except it's like a less cynical version of it. It's prayer is important, but acting is more important. Acting is also important, and you start with the action and then you pray. So that's one of the important takeaways I have from my faith tradition. Another one is that small actions matter. It's easy to say that, well, this thing is like, this action I could take is so small that it's not going to do anything in the grand scheme of things. But, again, from the prophetic tradition, we have this saying, whoever removes a stone or other harmful object from the path, one good deed is recorded for him. So you see a piece of trash in the road. It's not going to fix climate change if you pick that up, but you should anyway. If it's not just because it's a good deed, but because small actions matter. Another lesson from my tradition is that actions count more than intent. Now, intent is very important. You want to do an action with the right intention, but if you look at this saying from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it shows that, like, so it's very good, very easy to rack up points in Islam. People sometimes see it as a kind of a strict or a severe religion, but really, like, I feel like it's kind of hard to get into hell in Islam, and there are esoteric interpretations of Islam that don't even kind of see hell as like a physical fire and brimstone, place of fire and brimstone where you're tortured. Um, so anyway, so coming back to this saying, it pretty much says that it's summarized in that table on the left. So if you intend to do something good, but you don't do it, it's a good deed. If you intend to do something bad and you don't do it, it's a good deed. If you intend to do something bad and you do it, it's like one bad deed. But the best of all is if you intend to do something good and you actually do it, it's between 10 and it counts as between 10 and 700 good deeds. Or I should add, or many more. Who knows what that multiplier is? But it's a pretty sweet deal. And then finally, uh, it's never too late to take action. Um, Yet another saying from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is if the final hour comes while you have a palm cutting in your hand, and it is possible to plant it before the hour comes, you should plant it. The final hour is referring to the, day of resurrection when the world will end. What's the point of planting a palm tree at that point? But the saying exhorts us to continue to do the right thing, even when it may seem like there's no point in doing it. I'll add here that a thing that I think it's important to realize for those who may sometimes feel like there's no point to take climate action. There is some views that, not in Islam, but like in general, that say that it's too late to solve it, or we're not going to be able to fix it. So why bother? We should just enjoy the ride down. And the thing I want to say to that is the voices, the sources that kind of spread those messages are the same sources that, 10, 15 years ago were telling us that climate change didn't exist or wasn't being caused by humans or wasn't a threat. So those voices, those sources, largely, funded by the fossil fuel industry or propagated by Russian trolls online, have seamlessly switched once it became impossible to deny that climate change was happening, that it was caused by humans, and that it was a threat. They seamlessly kind of shifted from that viewpoint to it's too late to do anything about it, so let's not even try. Um, and the other thing I will add is that several of those sources are actually the same sources who previous to climate change being a major threat were the same ones who claimed that tobacco smoking wasn't actually bad for your health. They employed the same strategy that they do for climate change, where it was very hard to actually claim that cigarette smoking and tobacco use weren't bad, so they would try to cast doubt on the science. And that's pretty much the same strategy verbatim that they're applying to climate change. This is detailed extremely well in the book Merchants of Doubt by Naomi Oreskes. And I would highly recommend that to anyone who might be more interested in this topic. But for now, we're going to move on. So, taking action. We know that individual action is not enough to solve the climate crisis. Just as I said, not a single country can't solve it. So how can a single individual solve it? Why bother? Well, it is not sufficient, but it is necessary. If governments can take all the steps they want, but if people aren't willing to make a change, that nothing will change. They can offer all the EV incentives they want, but if no one buys one, or if we switch all our electricity generation over to renewable sources, but people are now suddenly using 20 times as much electricity, um, we're almost right back where we started. Other reasons to take action are, it gives us a sense of agency. If we're not doing anything, then it's more likely that we're going to feel helpless. And taking action, even if it's not making a big dent in the problem, it gives us a sense of agency, feeling that we are, doing something. Also, it sets an example for other people, and that should not be discounted. There's a lot of research in psychology that shows that people observe what other people do, and they are influenced by that more so than what people say. And all of the messengers of God, not just the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but Jesus Christ, Baha'u'llah, they all set an example with their lives. They you know they didn't do it because they uh what they didn't do it to set an example. They did it because it was the right thing to do. But for us, you know who are more practically oriented in solving this problem, it's important to think about this part, because what you do sets an example for others. And of course, you should do the right thing whether or not anyone's watching you. But and then yeah, in general, there's this saying from Joan Baez that action is the antidote to despair. So this refers back to the first lesson I kind of take away from Islam, which is to have hope. And taking action, any action, is an important step towards that. What are the kinds of actions you can do? So there's a lot of kinds of actions. This kind of table I have is derived from a talk given by Will Grant of the Pachamama Alliance. And I found it a very useful framework for kind of thinking about the different kinds of actions you can take, because it's very easy to just think about actions that you take in your own life and things at the opposite end of the spectrum, like voting, but there's many kind of different levels at which actions can take. So, the actions in his talk, kind of the level in his framework, the level one actions are actions you take yourself. The thing I would say there is, there's lots of actions you can take, but focus on the high impact ones, because turning off your light bulbs on your way out of a room is good, but it has a fractional impact. And I think most of us are capable of making some number of changes. But if you really are like, I'm going to make these like 10,000 changes, you're probably not going to make any of them. So on a personal level, the things you might want to focus on is focus on the impact of beef and dairy, because those have an outsized impact compared to, other meats you might eat. Um, and if you have money to spare, electric vehicles and heat pumps are great ways. Um, you know, I know the standard thing people say is, you should use solar panels, but actually in BC, since 97% of our electricity is generated from hydropower, switching to solar panels, installing solar panels actually doubles your carbon footprint, because they have a life of about 20 years. And if you once you take into account mining and transportation and disposal, it's actually worse. Now, if you're located elsewhere, this does not apply to you. But if you're located in BC specifically, as many of us are, um, you know, solar panels are not particularly helpful. Level two is talking to your friends and family. Talk about climate change. Part of what the lobbying groups have managed to do is make climate change like label it a controversial topic so that people don't want to talk about it. But it's actually not that controversial. Here in Canada, about 90% of people, you know, believe that climate change is happening, that it's caused by humans, and this is a real problem. Um, Now, why talk about it with people who already kind of believe what you believe? Well, they may not know what to do about it, or, you know, they may, they may not see other people doing things directly. So that's one reason to talk about it. I would add here, talk about it without shaming them. Shaming people, for flying or for eating meat, whatever, it's going to backfire. It's not the way, that's not the way to convert other people, and it's not the way any of our religious leaders, our founders of our religions would have done it. They all led by example. Um, Level three is community. It's affecting changes at your work, your place of worship, your kid's school, or your neighborhood cafe. Sorry, or your neighborhood. I read the word from the next line, which is volunteer at repair cafe, as an example of something you can do. And it's one of the ways in which I choose to try to affect change in the community. Um, and level four is policy. This is the other one you often hear about. Vote for politicians who want to address the climate crisis, write letters to your member of parliament, attend a climate rally. What action should you take? It doesn't really matter as long as you do something. And the other recommendation I have is to join a group, because when you're working with other people, it's easier to kind of motivate yourself. It's easier to kind of do something as part of a collective. And that's where I'm going to end things. Thank you.